Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the My Cloud Coach podcast. I'm Travis, and in this episode, we talk to Simon Binder about the impact of live and online events to your IT career. We'll talk about why coming up. But a small spoiler, if you're in Edinburgh this September for AVD Tech Fest, be sure to find me and say hello. Before we get to the interview, I want to let you know that I'm working on a new YouTube playlist for Intune. In the past, I've focused on consumption-only Azure services, such as those needed to run AVD, VM, storage, and networking, for example. But the trend is to move away from the old Windows AD we all know and love to cloud-only management. Once we lose Active Directory domain services, we also lose Endpoint Manager or SCCM and group policies. Intune is an important step to fill the gap those two products leave behind. Check out the playlist if you're interested in learning more about Intune. I took a break from YouTube last week. Summers are short in my part of the world, and to be honest, I needed a break. I also had to finish a couple presentations for AVD Tech Fest. The event is approaching fast. I'll be back soon with more Intune goodness. Also, I want to plug the US AVD user group. It's a free online community focused on Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365. Find us on meetup.com or search for US AVD user group. Enough of that. Up next is my discussion with Simon Binder on the impact of live and online events to your IT career. Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of the My Cloud Coach podcast. Today we're talking about the impact of online and in-person events with Simon Binder. Simon's a Microsoft MVP, principal workplace architect at Telia Cygate, and co-founder of the AVD Tech Fest. Welcome, Simon. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much, and very happy to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. Let's just jump in right away
Yeah,
and talk about the event you and Patrick Kohler are hosting. Can you tell us about the AVD Tech Fest?
yeah, absolutely. It really started off with me and Patrick meeting each other virtually during COVID. So we started to talk. I supported him in his journey as a community member and at work and such. And over the course of like a year, Patrick figured out that it would be fun to do something together once the
Hmm.
pandemic is over. And since the pandemic never came to an end, we decided to do a virtual conference focused on Windows Virtual Desktop and later Azure Virtual Desktop um, for the greater community around the globe, since this product really hadn't had that much coverage before the pandemic. And
Right.
it turned out incredibly well. We had some amazing speakers that supported us in this first virtual event, which gathered almost 1,000, or I think over 1,000 people from around the globe. And it really took off from there. So since then, we have done, I think it's 2 or 3 virtual events, and then
Hmm.
one physical, and then we have a second physical coming up now in Edinburgh in just under a month.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
and over the yeah,
September, I should know, 15th, is it?
you're supposed to be there.
I'll, I'll be there.
Yeah, September 14th.
14th, right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's on my calendar. I lean
yeah,
into the calendar, so I don't,
yeah.
I'll check the day
Uh,
before. So,
Yeah, exactly. And the thought that we shared from the beginning were really that it should be an event by the community for the community. We wanted to make it inclusive, so it's always been free. Um,
hmm.
we wanted to bring the best speakers and also ensure that there were a lot of time for the attendees to engage. And that's something we really have fought hard to keep when we went to a completely physical conference, which also has been quite interesting. And I think we'll get into that because we have never streamed the physical event and we don't plan to do that. We recorded the sessions last year. This year it will only be in person.
That was
And
that
that
was
is,
that was
yep.
Yeah, that was a follow-up question. Is
Mhm.
will this be streamed as well? So it's an in-person event only.
Yes, it's in person event only. And we really want to do that because we want it to be a networking event. And we will talk more about that in a few minutes. But we see, and I've experienced that myself, that I've, during the pandemic, signed up for so many fantastic virtual events. The content were great,
Mm.
but I didn't get more than just a possibility to learn. I didn't get what I always attended conferences for, which is the
Right.
networking part. So we really want people to be there. Um, and because of that, we have chosen to make it in person
Yeah.
only, but still keep it free.
I was I was all on board with the online conferences at the start of
Mhm.
the pandemic, but
Yeah.
after the first year, it became more and more difficult to
Yeah.
just. It's there's definitely a difference in watching something on a computer screen
Mhm.
versus being in the room for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that kind of goes into the one of the first questions I had
Mhm.
is what are the benefits of attending these events? But some of the conferences I've had a lot of good experiences with
Mhm.
really made the speakers available. Is that something
Mhm.
that the AVD Tech Fest also encourages?
Yeah, of course. And I think we are very fortunate in the EUC community in particular, but also in the greater Microsoft community, that most speakers are very happy to be available. And that is something we encourage. We have very long breaks between sessions so that you can network with the speakers, so that you can ask them questions once the session is over. We have it during one day, so everyone is there. Everyone can feel refreshed during the full day.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think that is the least you could expect from a speaker. To me, whenever I speak at a conference or user group, I always ensure that I'm available as much as I possibly can, letting people know where I am and letting people know that I'm more than happy to speak to you. It can be in some instances before I've done my session that I need to prepare, but otherwise,
Hmm.
I'm really passionate about ensuring that me and all the speakers we have at the event are available for all the attendees, because it might be much easier for a lot of people to engage with a person one on one, and even help getting introduced by me or Patrick or of our other speakers.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's there's so many points there that I want to pull out.
Mm.
One of them is just that if for those going to these conferences,
Hmm.
say hi, stop by and talk to them. Most
Yeah.
I work in this field and I love talking about
Mhm.
AVD and I love talking about technology, but I work out of my home where the
Yeah.
people who live here with me don't necessarily want to talk to me about AVD all the time. So to go into a
Exactly.
room and
Yeah.
to kind of nerd out with people is a
Yeah.
lot of fun. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And the other thing is just that's one of the values that I see of these,
Mm.
the whole point of this episode is what are the values of these events, and there's just as much value that I've seen, on the side conversations as there are in the presentations. So
Yeah.
that's something definitely worthwhile to take advantage of.
Yeah. And I think that I spoke to a colleague of mine earlier today around a huge event that we attended during the summer. And
Hmm.
my experience is that when you go to a conference, especially if it's your first really big conference, my experience is that your focus is catch as many sessions as you can, both
Hmm.
because you want to feel that you have actually learned something, you've actually done something, but also to show your employer, as an example, that I've actually been to 20, 30 sessions.
Right.
But over the course of the years, I've realized, I think the last physical Ignite I attended, I think I watched 2 sessions during the entire week. uh,
Yeah.
because the value to me is really meeting people, having those conversations, uh, visiting the expo, finding people
Hmm.
between sessions. And to me, that's been way more valuable than a lot of the sessions. So I think
Yeah.
to have that mindset as well, that sessions is great, especially if you know exactly what you want to learn. But
Hmm.
don't be afraid of taking the time to actually skip a session, because then you will
Yeah.
probably find that there are a lot of people that have no one to talk to in the expo, or
Hmm.
speakers preparing, or speakers relaxing afterwards, and then they are available all to you.
Yeah.
And that is a very valuable way of spending a conference.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another good point is don't overlook the expo and the vendors.
Mm.
There's a lot of very
Yeah.
knowledgeable people in there who
Yeah.
again are there to talk about this
Yeah.
they're not they're most of them won't force you to sign up there for a mailing list or if you do
Exactly.
it's not always that you're probably on it already but
Yeah.
there's a lot of great people to talk to and just learn about these different products and
Yeah.
some of them are going to be maybe not so worthwhile, but most of the
Mm.
times I've got a lot of value out of those conversations for
Yeah.
sure.
Absolutely.
So you've hosted the Tech Fest for a couple years now, and last year was in
Mhm.
person. Do you have
Mhm.
any examples of individuals leveraging those connections to make any career advancements or just technical advancements?
Yeah, absolutely. I have several, and I think it's goes for all kinds of attendees. We have sponsors that were able to meet new partners that they never would have met elsewhere in these events, and which were very good for both the partner and the sponsor. We have had persons that have met both new friends, new community friends that have been able to leverage and help them on their journey to become an MVP, as an example.
Hmm.
And we, of course, also have some stories where organizations have gone to this event. They have either got confirmation of what they are doing is right, or what the idea they've had is actually something that others have realized, so they can go back home and
Hmm.
realize that again. I can't think of any specific ones,
Hmm.
but I think that is the what makes me proud of being an organizer. That what drives me. That
Yeah.
I get all of these stories about people that have learned something or experienced
Hmm.
something or heard something, and they are able to put that into realization when they get back home.
Yeah, I remember my one of the first. I want to say it was 2017, I believe. I could be off on the dates,
Mhm.
but it was the first
Mhm.
Ignite I went to,
Yeah.
and I remember going to the expo or the Microsoft area, and they were talking
Mhm.
about this new technology where they're going to host the RD Gateway and RD Web in the cloud, and
Mhm.
I had
Yeah.
just deployed. Uh, remote desktop service in Azure, and I'm like,
Mhm.
wow, that's great, and that really started a very significant shift in my career in speaking and
Yeah.
stuff because that
Yeah.
ended up becoming WVD. And I was trying to
Mhm.
remember what the original name of it was. It was like RDMR or something.
MI. Yeah. RDMI. Remote
MI, yeah,
desktop modern infrastructure.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And that was to see it, and get kind of some of the behind the scenes. And I was
mm,
able to talk. I must have talked to the one of the product managers for half an hour, 45 minutes about it
yeah.
to learn more.
Mm, yeah.
So that's definitely worthwhile. Um,
Mm,
how about online? Now we were talking
mm,
about in person, but uh, online's a little bit tougher. But at least there's an opportunity to reach out after the fact or to learn
yeah.
about something and reach out to people. Do you see that happen?
I think it's very rare, to be honest. That's I actually had that experience when I did my first Ignite session
Hmm.
on WVD back in, I think it's 2018.
Hmm.
Um, and when I had feedback afterwards, that I'm always, when I'm speaking somewhere, I always end the session by saying that please reach out. I'm more
Hmm.
than happy to help you. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. But some of the feedback I received after that session were typical consultant. He wants us to reach out so that he can charge us. And
Uh,
like, is that how people interpret it? Because I've never thought about it in that way.
hmm.
So I must say that the persons that have reached out to me, and I've been speaking at events and conferences for 7 or 8 years now, it's very, very few. I think it's a handful afterwards. And but the ones that have reached out, we have always have super engaging conversations. They've always been really grateful and thankful. So I do think it's still that boundary that
Hmm.
a lot of people feel that, can I really disturb this person with my question?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes, please
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Because that
For
is the
sure.
best feedback you can possibly get.
Hmm.
And I think that is also the benefit of online events, because that's how you make it truly inclusive. And that's something we have argued a lot with me and Patrick for AVD Tech Fest. Should we stream? Should we not? What we figured out in the end were we really want to create that physical event, and
Hmm.
to make a high quality stream of a live event, it's complicated and it's
Hmm.
relatively expensive.
Yeah.
So the challenge there could be that we can't make the event happen at all because it gets too expensive to keep it free.
Hmm.
But other than that, I do think online events have a great place. I do think that um, Microsoft have really figured it out. I think they made it a lot better the last Ignite. We can talk about Ignite all along, but I think the hybrid experience of that and the MVP summit as well were really good. I'm fortunate to speak at JNUC, so JAMF. It's Mac
Hmm.
OS management. Their conference
Okay.
have always been incredibly well done in terms of hybrid settings, and that makes it very inclusive because you can be wherever you are in the world. You don't have to pay to fly somewhere, and you get a relatively good experience even if you're remote. But it really takes that real time aspect that we spoke about
Hmm.
before we started recording, and
Hmm.
also the trust in that if I reach out to a speaker, I will actually get a response. And I can promise anyone listen to this that if you ever reach out to someone after a session, they will respond because that
Right.
again is the best feedback we can get.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things also that I see, and maybe you can comment on it,
Mhm.
is uh, well, what I like to the story I like to tell people is that in 2000, year 2000,
Mhm.
I got an MCSE on Windows 2000, and I've
Yeah.
been able to leverage that knowledge for
Mhm.
almost 23 years
Yeah.
because a group policy is still a group policy. DNS is
Exactly.
still DNS.
Yeah.
Domain and forest trust. There has been changes and evolution through it.
Yeah.
Uh, but now with cloud, that's not the
Mhm.
case anymore. So these
Mhm.
events, are really not just, we've got networking part, but there is a
Mhm.
solid educational part as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that conferences can be really good to get that, like, really drinking from the fire hose. Like, you get everything, you get up to speed, you can be at one conference per year, and that might be everything you need to know.
Hmm.
What I encourage people to do, if that's why they go to a conference, is to ensure that they actually take the time after the conference to put all of this knowledge, like try all of these new things, because otherwise you might end up in a situation where you've learned a ton of things, you don't put
Hmm.
it into test or production, and then you forget it, or things have really or already evolved since you were at the conference. So I do think, and that is something I do encourage, especially my colleagues at work, that if you go to a conference, talk to your manager and tell the manager that I actually need 2 or 3 days after the event as well to really
Hmm.
get the most of it. And that can also be sharing it to colleagues or whatever it might be.
Yeah, yeah. So there are people who either might have a hard time attending these
Mm,
conferences, either due to time constraints or a work
yeah.
culture that doesn't support it.
Mm.
What advice do you have to help overcome those barriers to get full benefit of the experience?
I do think that first, to the organizers out there, and that, again, it's something we have struggled with. Can we say that an in-person event only is really inclusive? And I do think that you need to then take into consideration that, okay, how inclusive do you want it to be? What's the benefit? Because at some point you have a vision for the conference. But for the persons that, for whatever reason, have a hard time attending physical events or events in general, I do think that you actually need to think about the business case before you tell your manager something. Because for
Mhm.
most organizations, y- let's the most like expensive conference I can think of is probably Ignite or a Gartner conference or something where you spend in total probably around $5,000 or at least, with hotel, with travel, with conference, everything like
Mhm.
that. But for most organizations, that is a relatively small amount of money from a business point of view.
Right.
And if you can take away one single aspect from that conference that will improve your business or your user experience or whatever, it should be relatively simple to say that, okay, it was actually beneficial. You at least broke even. So I think look into the organization you work in or the customers you have and say that, okay, I know that we have two customers or two business units that have this challenge. And
Mhm.
I do think that if I go to this conference, I can meet a person or a company or get inspired to actually solve it. And I
Right.
think that is more beneficial than trying to figure something out using a search engine or
Mhm.
trial and error because you can go
Yeah.
straight for a solution. So I think it's a little
Trial
bit building a business case.
yeah. trial and error can become very expensive, especially with cloud.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
I
hey,
might have forgotten an Azure firewall at one point.
yes, yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have. We all have, anybody learning cloud has probably got some stories on that. But my
Yeah.
recommendation, I'll just throw it out there, is if you set up a new trial of Azure,
Yeah.
step one is learn about cost management and budgets and alerts.
Yeah.
there's
Yep.
there's no excuse
Totally
to not
agree.
know that you're running into a problem.
Yeah. So I think this,
That
could I add one more thing to that?
sure,
Because the
absolutely.
business case is one. The other is get help.
Mhm.
Like ask people around you that have attended conferences, or even ask the speakers themselves. Can you help me build the business case for me to go to this conference? And again, all the persons I know within the community would be happy to do that and explain to a manager or whatever it might be that, yeah, this is how we reason when we spend time going here to speak,
Mhm.
or when we pay to go here to speak. And we do think that this person that have been driven enough and passionate about enough to reach out to me and ask for help would actually benefit from it. So
Yeah,
build a business case and ask for help to either build a business case or even have the discussion,
yeah.
because there are a lot of people that are happy to help out with that.
That's great advice. I've worked for a few different companies over the
Mhm.
years, and I've been at the ones where there's no training budget and they're really
Yeah.
reluctant. And one of the
Mm.
greatest things I ever heard is and I didn't come up with this. I don't know where I heard it, but it's what if we train them or send them to a conference, and
Mm.
what if we train them and they leave? And
Yeah.
the response to that is, what if you don't and they stay?
Yeah.
that's
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
that's a bigger problem. Yeah.
And I've met those organizations, and they are
Yeah.
very lucrative for a consultant.
Yes, yes. That's
So
an
so
excellent
it's
point.
I yeah, and I do think that like you pay for it one way or another, and the
Mhm.
best asset you can possibly have as a company is employees that cares and feel appreciated. So
Right.
it's an
Yeah.
investment in the persons, and an investment
Mhm.
in the knowledge, and investment in the company.
Yeah. Now, one of the things we're getting close to wrapping up, but one of the things that I did, and I'm
Mm,
kind of putting this out as a little plug. When I wanted to go to more conferences,
mhm,
sometimes I had to pay for it out of pocket. So what I
mm.
did is I started speaking.
Yeah,
So, which I'll throw that out there. And
yeah,
have you dealt with new speakers? What we all started someplace. I mean,
mm,
I think what I'm trying to say is there's a really big value that a lot of people overlook about speaking, and I would
absolutely.
encourage everybody to give it a try.
Yeah. And again, I've coached a lot of people that wanted to start to speak, or improve the way they are speaking, and it's one of the things that I'm really enjoy teaching and supporting people within. And I can only encourage people to do it, because everyone has a story to tell. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter if you are one out of 10 or 20 people that want to talk about Azure AD automation, or sorry, Entra
Mhm.
ID
Yeah.
automation, because you have your take on it. And
Hmm.
especially if you can add like your experience or your vertical or something that you
Yeah.
do that are unique to you, then that's
Yeah.
something I want to listen to. And like you say, it's a perfect way to get into conferences.
Hmm.
And speaker rooms are usually very, very friendly, and you get
Yeah.
to meet people. And like I've been in this community, and I've spoken at almost all the conferences that I want to speak in. I have one more that I would like to get into at some point, but I've been everywhere, and I still get starstruck. Like
Yeah.
it's still like, how can I be in this room with these people and they are actually listening to me and they are willing to speak to me?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is something I still really enjoy. And
Yeah.
it's a fantastic experience. So, absolutely, if you are interested in starting to speak, again, I'm saying it again, please
Yeah.
reach out to me, or
Yeah.
reach out to someone else that you
Yeah,
trust.
reach out to me.
Uh,
A
yeah.
good spot to start is a
Mm.
local user group. Every
Yes.
almost if your city or town doesn't have a user group, start
Mm.
one. They're easy to
Yeah.
start.
Yeah.
And the one thing, because I'm on a couple, and the one thing I
Mm.
always say is these are for users by users. So
Yeah.
we want to hear the users. I will admit that we don't get a lot of takers. There's a general fear of public speaking that I get, but
Yeah.
that everybody who stands up on stage and talks has a fear
Mhm.
of public speaking. It's not that you
Yeah.
have it or
Yeah.
not, it's what you do with that fear. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I do think that to the point of user groups, because I started 2 user groups during the pandemic. One was the Swedish AVD user group, which is still running virtually. And then I started a local user group to ensure that, okay, this is a great opportunity to build a local community virtually and then
Mhm.
continue in the physical world, which we now have restarted. And we are between 10 and 20 people at the most at each meetup, but it's
Mhm.
super valuable to all that are there. And it doesn't have to be more than 5 to 10 people. It's a great
Yeah.
way to start. It's a great way to get to know new people. And it's a great way, like you said, to start to speak, because then you're in a relatively safe environment.
Yeah.
I'm always super nervous when I speak in front of smaller groups. I prefer
Mhm.
like super big stages where I can't see the
Huh.
faces of the people I'm speaking to.
Right.
But for a lot of people, a smaller group feels more secure, and it's a great way
Mhm.
to start.
Yeah. Well, with that, thank you, Simon, for joining us today. It was great speaking with you, and I look forward to seeing you next month in Edinburgh.
Yeah,
Uh,
likewise.
I'll be
It
there
will
the
be a
whole
lot of
week,
fun.
so I'll make
Yeah,
sure to be there. Was
great.
it the 14th we landed on?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I will
All
remind
right.
you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.